Welcome back. You're watching Live from Paris on France 24. It's the time of day when we look at what's happening in the French press and in the French media in general. James Creedon is the man for that, and he's here in the studio. Hi there, James.
Good evening, Laura.
Now, it's a common theme, isn't it, when the economy gets tough, particularly here in Europe. Politicians turn against immigrants,
right,
illegal and legal, and this time it's the French Interior Minister, Claude Guéant.
And he was on the front page of the left-leaning paper this morning, Libération, the voice of Le Pen, and Le Pen is the leader of the far right in France, so they're basically saying that the Interior Minister is trying to parrot Marine Le Pen. And inside they say that his latest issue is not just illegal immigration, but legal immigration, and he wants to reduce it by 10% in the next year. So it's a drum that he's constantly beating, this immigration drum. And they're pointing out that essentially until Sarkozy officially enters the 2012 campaign, because for now he still hasn't declared that he's going to be a candidate.
Isn't he?
Exactly. Claude Guéant is the guy who's going out there and doing the dirty work basically for Nicolas Sarkozy. And also Sarkozy, one of his strategies is to be a little bit more presidential than he has in the past. So he's trying to kind of keep mum on the controversial issues like immigration, security, and Claude Guéant is going out there and doing the dirty work for him. Also because Claude Guéant is not an elected representative, he's a nominated minister. In France, you can be a minister without being an MP. Dominique de Villepin was prime minister without ever being an elected representative. So he's got nothing to lose, basically. He can go out there and say all these controversial things and try to poach the votes from the far right. He's not risking losing office. And
he's not offending anyone.
Exactly. Well. So they're also talking in this about other things that prove that the UMP party is kind of poaching far-right votes. For example, cross-referencing the paperwork on immigrants with the paperwork on social security. This is another thing that Claude Guéant has been saying, which essentially infers that immigrants are more likely to defraud social security. So there's all these little things that are being put out there into the press, and the idea is that those who are maybe leaning towards the far right might vote UMP instead in the voting booth. Another thing that's creating a lot of controversy, a very controversial, obviously, general called Marcel Bijard. He was involved in the Algerian War, and this was in 1957. Torture was widely used, and in 2000 he said that those methods were a necessary evil. They're talking now about interring him at the Palais des Invalides, which is kind of like the pantheon of the greats for the military elite, etc. And so this is another means of, I suppose, people who are a little bit more conservative might think that's a good idea, and it's all a way of appealing to the far right.
Trying to scoop up the right-wing vote there here in France. Now, staying with French politics, if Nicolas Sarkozy does confirm that he will enter the 2012 race, which he's widely expected to, he'll be taking part in a lot of television debates.
Yes,
and the media's been looking closely at his tactics and his strategies, how he does that. What have you learned?
Well, Nouvel Observateur, a magazine here in France, they've called one of his strategies, they've given it a name, it's called paradoxical injunction. Now, that's a very complicated way. They're talking here about injonction paradoxale, and they're saying that he's drugged on it, that it's one of the techniques that he's using so much that it's almost like he's high on it. And so what he's doing essentially is, if he's asked a question about something very specific, say democratic deficit in Europe, he broadens it out and he says, would you like to be the President of the Republic? Would you like to be doing my job at the moment? Do you think this is an easy job? So he totally changes the issue, and the person who asks the question kind of doesn't really know how to answer. It's been made into an emotional issue. Another example of it,
it
throws them off balance. They're like, well, that's not really what I was asking, but now I've got to answer what you just said, and I don't know what to do anymore. Another example is apparently a judge was asking him about the efficiency of electronic bracelets for criminals, and he said, well, what would you prefer, that we have criminals roaming the streets? Would you like your children to be attacked? Is that what you want? And obviously, you don't want your children to be attacked, so you end up being in an emotional situation. So the idea is you take a technical question, you broaden it out into a much different, broader issue, and you make it emotional. And there was another example, apparently, with the reduction of nuclear power plants. Somebody was saying, do you not want to reduce the number of nuclear power plants in France? And he said, well, what do you want? Do you want to endanger France's national independence? So he's making it about a different issue. And apparently this is a technique that's been used by other politicians, but Sarkozy is the master. He's using it all the time.
He's got a clever campaign manager somewhere behind the scenes, hasn't he? All right, now we end with quite a strange dispute that's going on in one small French town, and kids who forget their dinner money are really getting named and shamed.
That's right. This is a mayor in the town of Rouffach. He decided in order to name and shame parents who weren't paying the annual fees or whatever it was for the canteen in the school. So he made a little screen, you can see it here, that was erected outside the canteen to name and shame the parents. So if your parents haven't paid, there's your name, there's your parents' name, and then of course what happens in the schoolyard, they're all saying, your parents didn't pay for the school meal, your parents, don't have enough money, whatever, and you had children crying, and it was awful. So child psychologists, lawyers, parents groups, everybody has been coming down on top of the mayor of Roufac like a ton of bricks, saying you can't do that, you've traumatised people, this is totally unacceptable behaviour.
Don't forget your dinner money. That's what the mayor says. All right, yes. James Creedon, many thanks indeed. Well, now it's time for web news, and as a UN report out yesterday showed that children are as much risk of violence in Syria as are adults. Take a look at this.